Greetings, this is Nick Lento, and I've got a message for two parties. The first is FBI Director James Comey, and it regards your actions of a week ago today, last Friday, when you released a letter to various members of Congress in which you announced that the FBI had come across a computer with emails in it which needed to be looked at to confirm whether or not they were new emails through Hillary Clinton's server, to determine whether they may or may not have had any kind of problematic elements in them. Okay, so you sent this letter to various members of the Congress, and we now all know, Congressman Chaffetz immediately, pretty much, released his own statement about your letter to the media, in which he announced initially that that the FBI was reopening the investigation, which a lot of people believed. I did at the time. I even repeated it to others. And as it turns out, that really was not the truth. In fact, once your letter was actually released and people were able to read it, and I was able to read it, it was pretty clear to me that what you were actually announcing was just that you had come across what appeared to be a cache of emails that may or may not be new, and that may or may not be problematic in terms of the contents, I guess, in terms of the existence of confidential or secret material in those letters. Okay, so what we're looking at now, as a consequence of your action, is that the American election for the presidency of the United States has been basically turned upside down and become chaotic in many regards. Now, what I'm saying to you, Director Comey, is not intended as an attack on you. In fact, from what I know of you, up to at least last Friday, and today too, actually, I continue to have great respect for your character and your honesty, because it's pretty clear that there were basically two reasons, from media reports anyway, that you took the action you took. Number one, you wanted to remain in compliance with testimony that you had already given under oath, in which you made a commitment to keep the committee apprised of any developments that might be ongoing. So that's one reason. And the other reason, according to press reports, is that there are rogue agents in the FBI who apparently have been systematically and pointedly leaking material, and that is material that is derogatory to Secretary Clinton and to her campaign, because they have a political agenda. They believe that she is a terrible person and that she should not be president, and evidently they're not above using their status and position within the FBI to take any measures they can to have that political perspective of theirs become dominant. And further, that a number of these people were in some way, shape, or form even connected to former Mayor Giuliani, who, as we all know, is very up there in the Trump campaign as a primary surrogate. So what we have here is something that you did with the best of intentions and with the highest level of ethical of ethical quality. That was your wish and desire to be consistent with the high ethical standards to which you feel obligated to act in your role as FBI Director and just as an American, as a human being. And I respect that. However, we've all heard the expression about how sometimes the best of intentions lead us to a place that is undesirable. So that intentions alone are not determinative of the best of outcomes. So what we have here now is a situation where something you did is adversely affecting the election, and potentially far more than that. But and it's not just me who's saying that. It is, as I understand it, literally hundreds of people who have much more knowledge and much larger reputations and positions from which to say it, that you messed up, that you shouldn't have done what you did, and that you violated at least a couple of protocols of how the agency is supposed to conduct itself and investigative agencies in general. The idea is not to release information until it is in the form perhaps of an indictment, and critiques have been made that maybe you went too far in your original testimony. And in any event, I believe you messed up, and I have to suspect pretty strongly that you believe you messed up also. So what can be done about this? Why am I sending you this message? What is my purpose? What is my wish? What is my intention? And at this point, it is not simply to yell at you or berate you or condemn you or castigate you or blame you, although elements of all those things may come across. My hope, Director Comey, is that what I'm pointing at will, if it is the will of God and your own will, because you have free will, that you examine your conscience and see if you don't think it's the best thing to do right now to resign as FBI Director, but not simply to resign as a way of saying mea culpa and somehow punishing yourself, although, I can understand that, but that's not nearly good enough. That won't have much chance of undoing what's been done. And me simply giving my theory of the case and saying why I think what was done was wrong is not going to have any effect in undoing the consequences of what was done. Not that many people are going to watch this video and follow my rambling presentation. My hope is that you somehow get to see this and consider what I'm saying to you within the next 24 hours, and that you choose to do the following. Publicly announce your resignation, and further, make it clear that the letter that you sent was not a, quote, reopening of the case, unquote, which is at best, an exaggeration and misinterpretation of what you intended to say in that letter, and I think what you did say, because I did eventually get around to reading that letter after seeing the initial reports and reading what was written in the press, that it said you had reopened it, all based on Congressman Chaffetz's original distortion. So, number one, deny that the investigation is being reopened in that sense, and make it clear that all that's happening is that the FBI is now in the process of examining what may or may not be new emails. And by new, I mean emails heretofore not seen before. Okay? And if, in fact, it turns out that there are new emails, then they have to be looked at and analyzed and scrutinized to see if there is any material in them that shouldn't be there in terms of national security concerns, etc. And then at that point, perhaps it would be, depending on what you find, perhaps it would be appropriate to say that the case is being reopened. But even then, one would wonder about all the other consequences that have developed since last week, because it goes far beyond the distortion that Congressman Chaffetz introduced into the mix. As we all know, the Trump campaign and Donald Trump himself have used the splash, the media splash, the attention that this letter has generated from you, to put forth their own preconceived, predetermined notions as to the absolute guilt and certainty that Secretary Clinton is, quote, a criminal, and that she deserves to be jailed, no less. No trial, no hearing, no indictment, nothing. Just throw her in jail. And I've heard some of her supporters call for far worse than that even. Now, what we've seen in this election in the past week is a situation where she has been forced to shift from a high-level statement of her aspirational wishes for the country and to try to end the campaign on a higher note, to where, because of consequences in the polls due to the repercussions of the letter that you sent, she might lose this election. And it even goes beyond the presidency. We're talking perhaps scores of senatorial and congressional seats that may or may not change hands contingent on the consequences of your actions. And getting back to what I said, lots of people, I believe it was attorney generals of 50 states, people that you've worked with, and Alberto Gonzalez, and large numbers of Republicans, even the Republican former congressman who is a big Trump fan, whose name doesn't come to mind now, who a few days ago said that that electing Donald Trump was so important that he talked about his musket as a symbolic act of, or as a symbolic gesture of how strongly he feels that Donald Trump should win, that Hillary Clinton is terrible. Even that guy says that what you did was wrong. Why? Because he has a background in the law, and I believe he knows his stuff, and he knows that you violated guidelines that you weren't supposed to violate. All, again, with the best of intentions and from a perspective of great integrity, and you're a good guy. No one's saying you're dishonest or you tried to do anything wrong. Unfortunately, we all mess up. And I could use a different word than that, but this isn't the place for the time for that to be used. We all mess up, and what I'm hoping you do is the one thing you can do to repair the damage, because simply resigning isn't enough. What I'm calling upon you to consider doing, because I can't make you do it, I can't browbeat you into doing it. All I can do is present you with my perspective and pray and hope that your own conscience kicks in. If you agree with me, then you take it upon yourself to do what is right. And I would suggest to you that beyond a resignation, the taking of responsibility, that you should condemn the way that your letter was distorted and the way that the Trump campaign is now basically lynching, to talk a kind of literally a high-tech lynching on the internet and in the mass media of Hillary Clinton, because she doesn't deserve to be tried, convicted, and sentenced on the basis of your letter. That's for sure. And I think any reasonable, informed person would agree with that. Now, my hope is that enough people will have the patience to sit through my meandering presentation here, and that among those individuals, somebody somewhere who sees this will have access to you and will present this to you, and you will take it into consideration. And that's the only thing I can really do to try to remedy this. And this is now something like 7 o'clock or so Friday night. By the time I get this out there, maybe it'll take a day or so, hopefully, and you'll see this, and in the next on this weekend, maybe Sunday night. By Sunday night, I would hope that you take it upon yourself to do what I believe is the right thing, and that is to resign, to explain just why your letter was not a reopening of the investigation, but rather just providing information to the committee about the possibilities of the investigation being reopened, contingent on what was discovered about the emails. And number 3, condemning. I call upon you to condemn the way the Trump campaign and others have harped upon the release of your letter and distorted it in such a way that they're declaring Hillary Clinton guilty of a felony and worthy of going to jail. And I've heard some of her supporters call for worse than that. And, it really truly resonates in the context of a high-tech lynching. And it's not fair. It's not right. And aside from what's fair and right for her as an individual, the country does not deserve to have an election turned around like this on the basis of a distortion and lies that have emerged over something that you put out there and the way you put it out there. And I would even take it further. The repercussions go beyond America. We're talking about the whole world, the economy of the world, and the ecology of the world. Because as we know, from my perspective anyway, global warming is certainly a real thing. And to have one person in rather than the other can affect future tipping points that we might not otherwise have triggered. So from my perspective, that's a lot can hinge on who the next presidency, who the next president of the United States is, because there's so much power that office holds, and the repercussions are just unimaginable on all kinds of levels. And if you don't want to believe in global warming, just in terms of our foreign policy and the economic policy and healthcare in this country, education, all of these things will be different contingent on who the next president is. And I believe those are decisions and choices that should have been left to the candidates and to the American people to determine. And I think it is a shame that something you did is having such an impact. So I would hope that you consider what I suggested earlier and let go of the position and assert your perspective that what was done with the information you put out there was a distortion, and that you condemn the, I would say, outright lies and heinous twisting and weaponizing and politicization and degradation of your good intentions into something which is ugly and poisonous and does not belong in the American body politic. I believe it's toxic. So that's basically it. Oh, and I said at the beginning there were two groups, two categories, I should say, to which this message is addressed. One is Director James Comey. The other, as I intimated earlier, is the audience, are the people who are watching this who are not you, but who might have access to you, whether it's somebody in the press or somebody in the government or somebody who knows somebody in the press or the government that can get this to you so that you can make your own determination based on consulting with your own conscience in the eyes of our Lord. Because ultimately, that's what this is about. We all have to answer to that which is higher, and these matters are far more important than any of us as individuals. And I believe you would agree with that. So that's it. Now I've already said what I have to say, probably 2 or 3 different times in different ways, and I apologize for the repetitious and rambling nature of this communication. And so now it's up to it's between you and God to see where this goes, if anywhere. Thank you.